Welcome to Beyond the Things Written. Recently, I've been engaged in studying the chronology of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, which is part of the Millerite movement, having to do, of course, with the chronology that was given to Jehovah's Witnesses. So I had to take the time to listen to some ex-Seventh-day Adventists, and it was truly enlightening. I always knew there was a commonality between the two groups, but not how extensive that connection really is. So this episode will discuss some of the similarities between Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses. Up next on Beyond the Things Written. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the similarities between Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses. There was some Seventh-day Adventists in my old territory, as we used to say. There was a Seventh-day Adventist hospital and a church. And there was a community in Jehovah's Witness world. It was good territory, right? It was good territory, meaning that you could place a lot of magazines and have Bible studies. And it was of course, a lot of immigrants in this area and new people in and out. So we were always there for Bible studies and things of that nature. And enjoy talking with the Seventh-day Adventists because I could talk to them about the Trinity. And for instance, one of them one time came to me and said, "Oh, we're cousins. We're cousins. Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists are cousins." I thought, because of the chronology. So what it means is that we get this from Millerites. Okay, so the Millerite was a man. He was a man in the 1820s and 30s. The type of chronology that was adopted by Jehovah's Witnesses for the first 50, 60 years. And the Seventh-day Adventists, there's so many commonalities. This is where a lot of what Jehovah's Witnesses will become Jehovah's Witnesses actually gets funneled through. So I thought today we'll take a look at a few of them. So I made a little bit of a list here. Seventh-day Adventists versus the Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, so obviously the first one is the use of chronology. The chronology for Seventh-day Adventists is based upon 1844. Now, what happened with chronology obviously predicted Jesus' return. It didn't happen. So the door got shut in 1844. Again, it wasn't really an organized church even. That's another commonality, is they are against organized churches. So they weren't really trying to form a church. They were from all the different churches, and they were getting on this bandwagon of the chronology. And the chronology was Gentile times, Israel's double, Earth's great jubilee, times of restitution, the end of 6,000 years, 1,260 days, 1,290 days, 1,335 days, and the 2,300 days. Those were all given prophetic significance, just like Jehovah's Witnesses originally did with their chronology. Check out the video on Jehovah's Witness original chronology. So there's a commonality between them, is that they weren't trying to create a religion, just like Russell wasn't trying to create a religion. They believed Jesus Christ's second coming was in their lifetime, and that they were able to use the secret code of the Bible to do day for years and match it up here, match it up there, and whoa, Jesus is coming here. So Jehovah's Witnesses originally used it exactly the same way. Another commonality is what we would call Arian belief. So the Arian is not with a Y, but with an I. And it's talking about a fellow, an actual guy. His name was Arius. And he lived in the 4th century, in the 300s, with another guy named Athanasius. Now, it's interesting, is Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe what Arius believed, but just being non-Trinitarian today just makes you an Arius believer. He was considered very important to Jehovah's Witnesses early on. He was one of these 7 congregations. These 7 congregations of Revelation were actual people, right? Russell's tombstone, the Laodicean messenger, right? There's 7 types of major Christian figures. They're not necessarily prophets, but important to Christianity, and Arius was one of them for Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, why is that common? Seventh-day Adventists are Trinitarian. Well, not always. They actually started off being not dogmatic about it. And same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. Hatton, the associate of Russell at the beginning, was a Trinitarian. So again, the commonalities. They could associate both Trinitarians and non-Trinitarians. Ellen White, the leader, never made much of a fuss about it. It was her husband that was strictly Arian or non-Trinitarian. So eventually they did take on the Trinity position, but even then, according to ex-Seventh-day Adventists, it's not exactly the same Trinitarian that Orthodox Christianity would have. So another commonality is pacifism. Pacifism. Like the Quakers and the Mennonites, Seventh-day Adventists, and Jehovah's Witnesses do not participate in war. This stems, again, from this time period of how they were starting to see the scriptures anew, and they all were coming up with this that eventually seeped into Jehovah's Witness psyche. In fact, there's a famous movie about a Seventh-day Adventist who would not participate. The witnesses probably wish it was one of them. It was a great witness for the Seventh-day Adventists because he comes out looking gold in that movie. In the comments, if you guys remember what that movie was, Seventh-day Adventist Pacifist. The idea of coming out of Babylon, steeped in not just Protestantism, but again, renewed with Milleritism, not just from Catholicism, who was the papacy, the man of sin, right? In the 1799, that whole start of the last days. They were to come out of Babylon, which also meant Protestants. Basically, it meant anyone that had a problem with it that were Babylon, just like Jehovah's Witnesses. Another commonality is they both refer to themselves as being in the truth. That was a common term. In fact, they borrowed it. It came actually from an earlier time of the Enlightenment period in the 18th century, which is interesting. They also use terms like colporteur. I mean, even today they don't use it, but witnesses did use that as a pioneer. They were called colporteurs. Another commonality is about how they interpret Scripture. So like Jehovah's Witnesses see themselves as true Israel and everything is about them, Adventists have a similar way of looking at scriptures as always about them as the true church. For instance, Seventh-day Adventists are very seventh day, right? So it's the Sabbath keeping, and it becomes this huge thing for them. It's the mark of the beast to worship on Sunday. And Saturday worship is so important to be the identity of a true worshiper, and these are going to be the true churches worshiping on Saturday. And then in the future, the churches are going to make Saturday laws that you're going to ban worshiping on Saturday. And they're going to come after the Seventh-day Adventists because they're worshiping. And then, all the events take place. Witnesses is a little different, but the same. They believe they're going to be persecuted in the future. Instead of the Sabbath, to them it's Jehovah's name and saying Jehovah every third word. You got to say Jehovah a lot, as if the Jews didn't say it a lot in the first century. It didn't stop them from being destroyed. So, but anyways, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe in sanctification of Jehovah's name, the vindication of his sovereignty, Gog of Magog of Ezekiel 38, and they believe that they're going to be, after all religions destroyed, except them, then they're going to get attacked and persecuted. So again, commonality, one being persecuted because I guess it's Jehovah's name, and one being persecuted for Saturday laws of some type that you're not allowed to worship on Saturday. Both are ridiculous. No one's going to persecute you for those reasons. Governments persecute people all the time. Research it, you'll see dozens and dozens of groups being persecuted all over the world. Lots of countries, lots of groups get persecuted, okay? It's not a sign of anything. It's a sign of the intolerance of a dictator or whatever the form of government is. It has nothing to do with Bible prophecy here. Like the Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses do this in an extraordinary way because they interpret the Lord's Day in Revelation to be 1914. So everything from Revelation was made from 1914. So you get these things like trumpets are conventions. The Jehovah's Witnesses had these hard-hitting messages with this pamphlet, Kingdom News number 14. This is the bowls of God's wrath. It's just ridiculous. That's what John was talking about. Something that nobody's even read today. We could even talk about what happened in 1922 convention. We're talking about 1925. It's supposed to be part of some trumpet blast. Adventists have similar ways of looking at things. Oh, another one that gets me is a lot of groups do this. Is shutting the door. We talk about this. They always got to shut the door on everybody, right? You don't believe what we believe, that door is going to be shut. In 1844, that didn't happen. Oh, well, that door got shut, folks. And then they realized the door was open still. Witnesses Similarly, in 1881, the high calling was over. So this idea of shut door was shut in 1881. It was shut in 1918. It was shut in 1935. And now it's open for those who get to go on the governing body, get to claim to be of this anointed, despite not being baptized into Christ, no speaking in tongues or anything like that, which is in the first century. And so the door is kind of creaking open for witnesses. And you got to squeeze on through. When I was a witness, it was down to like 8,000 witnesses that claiming to be of this anointed. That door cracked open a bit. Now they've got 20,000 of them squeezing through that door. So the shut door, open door, it seems to be a fascination with a lot of these groups, right? The scripture in 2 Thessalonians, standing in the temple of God, claiming themselves to be God, going around telling people the door's shut, speaking for God like that. Spiritualizing their failures. 1844, 11 years later, that shut door, but then they realized, oh no, it was actually Jesus' investigative judgment. Yeah, that's what happened. So the date was right, the expectation was wrong. And Jesus moved from the holy to the Holy of Holies. And then now Jesus is in there. He's judging everyone, going through the books. That's what he's doing. It's taking a long time. I mean, there's lots of people that lived on the earth. It's going to take a while to get through those books. This investigative judgment is interesting, the way it plays out amongst Seventh-day Adventists to this day. There's some people wondering, oh man, am I being judged yet? And stuff like that. These weird things that are unique to the culture of the Seventh-day Adventists. But Jehovah's Witnesses, they've been spiritualizing to an art. All right? So the first spiritualization took place actually without Russell. Okay? So the first spiritualization was Barber. They predicted 1873, 1874. It didn't happen. That's when they came up with this, we looked at the emphatic diaglott, and it said presence instead of coming, and somehow that means invisible. So what? It says presence. But anyways, to them, presence meant invisible. He really started to do that before Russell got in. Russell got in 76. He got a hold of the Herald of the Morning, and he calls them over, and they meet in Philadelphia. Can convince me. He convinced them. He convinced them not just of the Gentile times of 1914, but of 1799, the end of 6,000 years in 1872, 1874, 1878. They took the whole lock, stock, and barrel and took it. As they thought the end of the world was coming in 1878. Okay, so that's the first one. So in 1877, when they do the three worlds and all that stuff, right, which Russell financed, it's all about 1878. 1914, yeah, it's there, but it had nothing to do with them. That was Israel. Israel's going to be restored by then. They thought there was going to be anarchy maybe 10 years before or so. They were still thinking right then and there, their little group going to heaven was going to happen in 1878. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Were they humble enough to admit they were wrong? No, they were humble enough to admit they were right. Yeah, humble enough to admit we were right. It was just spiritualized. And then they started to resurrect the saints at that point. And Jesus came in kingdom power. Just like there's invisible reign, and there's 3.5 years till he came. And so then you take 3.5 years. Obviously, he came invisibly. Spiritualized that one. Then they moved to 1881, of course, because there's parallels, right? 3.5 years happened in the first century, must happen 3.5 years in our time. Then 1881, didn't happen. Spiritualized it as the end of the high calling. And actually, they kept that teaching. Everyone else, part of his movement was a replacement. It's kind of what Jehovah's Witnesses believed from 1935. But interesting, right? Lots of commonalities, not just between those two groups, a lot of the smaller groups as well, like a tree branch, and a trunk of a tree, how they all kind of relate. Of course, they all think they're distinct, and the one true church and the one true religion, and often anyone that doesn't agree with them are going to be destroyed, It's interesting to see oftentimes the belief in another religion. One of the ways to open up eyes of people in cults is to watch videos on cults of other groups, isn't it? Well, thank you for joining me again. We'll see you next time on Beyond the Things Written.